My girlfriend shook. I didn't mean to kiss him, it just happened. So did my decision to leave. I watched her cry, swearing it was a mistake, but her weakness had perfect timing. Right after his promotion party. I didn't shout or beg. I just let her regret have the room she wanted me to vacate. Last Wednesday, my girlfriend Haley looked like she'd just walked out of a horror scene. Pale, lips pressed together, fingers drumming nervously on the tabletop. I did something stupid, she said, her voice low, almost swallowed by the clatter of cups and chatter around us. We were in the same cafe where we'd celebrated every anniversary since we'd started dating. Where the barista knew our orders by heart. Where we had first stolen a kiss under the dim Edison bulbs. Now it felt like a stage, with every corner of the room suddenly illuminated by the weight of what she was about to drop. She fiddled with her phone for a long moment, scrolling, tapping, then exhaled sharply as if she were trying to push the words out of her chest. I kissed Carter, she confessed, almost whispering, but it carried across the table, and in the hum of conversations, I could hear it clearly. It meant nothing. It just happened. The words hovered like smoke over our latte cups. I wanted to drop my head into my hands, punch the table, or scream. Instead, I froze, watching the foam on my cappuccino slowly collapse under my stirring spoon, leaving pale circles like bruises in the tiny porcelain cup. Around us, the cafe reacted in real time. A man at the corner table coughed. A woman near the register paused mid-laugh, and I swear someone even chuckled, either out of disbelief or some twisted sense of theater. Haley's face burned red. She buried it in her hands, her trembling fingers gripping her hair like a lifeline. I stayed still. I didn't speak. I didn't look at her. I just watched the chaos in miniature. The barista carrying a tray passed, the clatter of milk frothing, the aroma of espresso mingling with the tension hanging over our booth. Time stretched thin. My mind replayed the last few weeks, trying to find the signs I missed. The late-night texts she said were work-related. The sudden interest in Carter's hiking stories. The way she laughed at his jokes with a brightness that had nothing to do with me. I thought about the small things that suddenly looked like glaring warning signs. The Instagram comments she defended as innocent. The weekend she suddenly said she needed to run errands. And now here we were. A confession laid bare over steaming drinks and the scent of baked pastries. In a cafe that used to feel like ours alone. Finally, I spoke, my voice low but steady, almost casual. Nice place you picked for honesty, I said, letting the words roll out with an evenness I didn't feel. She lifted her head, her eyes wide, shimmering with tears, searching for anger, blame, anything. She found calm. Or something like it. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was present in the wrong way or the right way, I couldn't tell which. My hands were folded around my cup. My knuckles had gone white from gripping the ceramic. Then, as if on cue, her tears came, breaking over the moment when the waiter set down the check with a soft clink. Timing couldn't have been more brutal. A slow drip ran down her cheek, and she dabbed it desperately with a napkin, the tissue crumpling in her grasp. I didn't offer mine. I didn't know if I could. The cafe's warm lights, the smell of cinnamon and espresso, the low murmur of conversation around us. It all seemed wrong, almost absurd. We were actors in a scene that had been poorly rehearsed, the audience real and unforgiving. I realized people were looking. Some were curious, some probably thought it was another petty argument, two people in love crumbling over coffee. One of the baristas paused mid-sweep, glance darting between us and the register. A small group by the window murmured, whispering with amusement or disbelief. Haley pressed her hands harder against her face, trying to disappear into the wooden booth, and I just sat there, waiting, observing, calculating. The betrayal wasn't just in her lips. It was in the spectacle she'd chosen, the timing, the audience, the public unspooling of what had been private. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked finally, her voice cracking, quiet, tentative. The question hung, fragile and urgent, like a thin thread dangling over a canyon. I wanted to answer, to yell, to demand explanations, but I only shook my head. My lips pressed together, forming words I didn't speak. My mind was already racing ahead, thinking about keys, about boundaries, about what came next. The cafe had become a courtroom. The espresso machine's judges, the patrons' jurors, and I, for the first time, felt the full weight of silent verdicts surrounding me. I finished my coffee. The foam was gone. My hands, still around the cup, trembled slightly. "I guess this is fine," I said finally, voice even neutral. Not acceptance. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Haley's sobs broke through the ambient noise again. I set down the cup. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't speak. I just looked around, noting faces, noting reactions, noting that the world kept moving even as mine had stopped. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time I felt a strange clarity. I had to act, and soon. She swore it was a moment of weakness, the kind that apparently manifests right after your ex's promotion party, in front of the entire office. Carter, the same guy she dated in college, the one whose name I hadn't heard in years, was now her manager. Her phone buzzed incessantly while we sat in that crowded cafe, notifications flashing across the screen. Friends tagging her in pictures, Carter liking her posts. The social media evidence was unavoidable. I hadn't scrolled, hadn't looked for it, but it found me anyway. Photos from that night were plastered across Instagram. Her smiling next to him, champagne in hand, hair flawless, teeth gleaming. The caption read, "Old team, new memories," winking face. I could almost feel the winks, the inside jokes, the silent messaging she thought I wouldn't see. When I asked about it, she laughed. A nervous, short laugh like a squeak from a rubber band. "It was nothing," she said. "Just a celebration. You're reading too much into it." I didn't argue. I didn't snap. I only observed, noting every twitch, every hesitation. She was trying to sell me a narrative, perform the part of someone innocent, but the script was thin and brittle. Her laughter was the first crack. Then she flipped the script, as if rehearsed for the next scene. "You're paranoid, controlling, overreacting. You're making it about you again." Her voice rose slightly, just enough to carry across the booth, just enough to attract the attention of a nearby couple sipping flat whites. They glanced over, eyebrows raised. Haley didn't care. Her performance required witnesses. Every tear, every tremble, every forced gasp of regret. Calculated. I didn't yell. I didn't reach for her phone. I didn't hurl accusations into the cafe air. I simply watched. I took notes in my head. Observed posture, micro-expressions, the way her fingers tapped the table in rhythm with her heartbeat. She leaned forward, placing her palms on the edge of the table, shoulders tense, lips quivering. "You have to believe me," she said, voice quivering on the perfect note of vulnerability. That was the moment the mask slipped slightly, just enough for me to see the performance underneath. This wasn't confession. It wasn't guilt. It was preemptive damage control. She wanted me to nod, forgive, maybe even cover for her if the story leaked, before it spread beyond her control. Her timing was immaculate. It was as if she had studied the calendar, the social media notifications, the ebb and flow of gossip in her office, and picked the perfect moment to drop the bomb. Last Wednesday, when the cafe was full, when the barista paused mid-pour and glanced our way, when someone laughed quietly at our table as if they'd stumbled into the climax of a soap opera. The theater of betrayal. She'd chosen witnesses. The emotional arithmetic she calculated down to the decimal. Maximum visibility, maximum remorse, minimum culpability. I realized then that she had practiced this moment, rehearsed the tears, the gasps, the timing of the confession, just so she could control the narrative before I had a chance to speak. I stared at her, trying to gauge sincerity through the facade. My mind raced, cold clarity setting in. There was no remorse here. There was only management of consequences. Every word she chose was strategic. Every breath measured. Every tear carefully timed. She wasn't confessing because she felt guilty. She was confessing because she wanted a head start on spin control. And the cafe? Perfect stage. Friends? Strangers? Co-workers? Anyone who might later ask, "Did you hear what happened?" Already primed to accept her performance. I felt my pulse slow, my chest tighten. This wasn't about the kiss. It was about control, and she had it, at least for now. I finished the remaining sips of my coffee. It had gone cold, foam separated, leaving only pale stains on the ceramic. I looked around. The nearby table of students sharing a laptop, a couple whispering over croissants, the barista stacking cups, all oblivious to the subtle chess game unfolding in the booth in the corner. All witnesses to the perfect betrayal. And I realized with sharp, clinical certainty that I needed my own strategy. A response that wasn't emotional. A countermove that didn't rely on yelling or tears, but on cold, procedural clarity. Because if this was a performance, I had to treat it like a play, recognize the script, identify the actors, and act accordingly. I set down my cup, careful not to make a sound. Her hands still trembled on the table, head low, eyes brimming. But I wasn't reaching out. I wasn't comforting. I wasn't nodding. I was planning. Notes in my head, a checklist forming with every breath. Locks, keys, financials, boundaries, evidence, documentation. Every micro-decision she had taken to shield herself, I would now counteract with deliberate precision. Because she hadn't just kissed Carter. She had orchestrated exposure. She had weaponized her moment of weakness. And I wasn't going to be collateral damage. That night, I let the apartment breathe. The lights were dim, just enough to see the hardwood floors glint under the kitchen pendants. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans lingering from earlier, of old books stacked in the corner, of burning wax from a candle I hadn't touched in weeks. Haley sat on the edge of the sofa, still in the clothes from our cafe rendezvous, face pale, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. Her fingers drummed nervously on her knees, tapping a rhythm I couldn't name, like the faint staccato of someone rehearsing an apology that had already failed. "I have to hand it to you," I said, calm, measured. "Your timing is impeccable. Wednesday, cafe, peak hour. Bravo." I kept my voice even, deliberately light. She blinked, a small flush creeping up her neck. I didn't give her time to respond. I walked to the drawer in the sideboard, the one she never opened, and pulled out an envelope. My hand trembled just slightly, enough for her to notice. Inside were 2 first-class tickets to San Francisco. I'd been planning to propose on her birthday, 2 weeks from now. The perfect moment, meticulously planned. My chest tightened, and I let the tension linger. Her reaction was instantaneous. "Are you serious?" she whispered, disbelief lacing every syllable. Her eyes were wide, and the warmth of shock spread across her face, mingling with the residual paleness from earlier. She leaned forward, as if reaching for the envelope might anchor her reality, and then froze when I placed a small, black velvet box next to the tickets. I didn't open it for her, didn't let her touch it. The engagement ring inside caught the light from the pendant, glinting with calculated brilliance. Every facet reflected the same truth I felt pressing through me. Clarity over chaos, logic over drama, cold precision over betrayal. I lifted the tickets, feeling the subtle weight of paper and ink, of dreams deferred, of promises I hadn't yet broken but no longer intended to fulfill. I walked to the fireplace, her gaze following with an almost imperceptible tremor of fear. With deliberate care, I held the tickets over the edge of the hearth and lit them. The flames licked the corners first, curling the pristine paper with the whisper of combustion. Smoke rose, carrying with it the scent of charred cardstock, of intentions gone up in flames. The fire danced, consuming the image of a trip we would never take together, a future she had no longer earned the right to share. "You've lost your mind," she exclaimed, voice cracking. Panic seeped into the edges of her words, betraying the performance she'd maintained in public. Her hands moved in a futile motion toward the ring, the tickets, anything to halt the destruction. But I didn't stop. I watched the tickets curl, blacken, and finally surrender to the flames, ash drifting lazily into the hearth, a silent witness to my resolve. "No," I said quietly, tone deceptively gentle, almost intimate. "I haven't lost anything. I just found my clarity." The firelight flickered across her face, painting shadows over features I had known so well, yet never truly seen until now. For the first time, I saw her without the mask, without the rehearsed sorrow, without the calculated tremble of performance. She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't regretful. She was stunned, stripped of the facade she relied on to navigate the world. The velvet box remained untouched, a silent monument to the life I had planned, the life I no longer intended to share with her. She inhaled sharply, the sound jagged, uneven. Her eyes welled again, not with contrition, but with confusion, frustration, disbelief. Every carefully practiced micro-expression from earlier, pleading, guilt, apology, collapsed under the weight of the fire. I could see her recalculating, trying to rewrite reality, but the script had changed, and I was authoring it now. I stepped back from the fireplace, letting the embers consume the last edges of paper, smoke curling in lazy spirals to the ceiling. Silence fell over the apartment, thick, almost tangible. Her lips parted, then closed. She opened her mouth again, searching for words, and I held up a hand, calm, commanding, precise. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about boundaries. You've performed your betrayal publicly, and now, in private, I'm reclaiming control. Every future you imagined, every plan you counted on, it's yours no longer." My voice was even, flat, unwavering. She couldn't argue with calm logic. She couldn't charm her way out of this one. She hadn't just kissed Carter. She had attempted to dictate the narrative of my response, and I wasn't participating. Her hands fell to her lap. Her gaze dropped to the ashes at the bottom of the fireplace. For the first time, she was silent. Not calculating, not strategizing, not performing. Just silent. I felt the strange, heavy satisfaction of witnessing a mask fall, of seeing pretense give way to truth. It was cold. It was hard. But it was honest. And in that honesty, I realized something vital. Clarity is combustible, but necessary, and sometimes survival requires flames. I don't deal in emotions, I deal in facts. My job as a data analyst isn't about opinions, feelings, or dramatic monologues. It's about patterns, anomalies, probabilities, and cold numbers. And patterns, no matter how carefully hidden, always leave traces. I noticed them weeks ago. Late nights when her phone went silent for hours, unusual login times, muted calls after 9 p.m., the subtle deletion of messages, and sudden bursts of enthusiasm for meetings she said she had to attend. The anomalies were faint at first, easy to ignore, but in aggregate they told a story she wasn't sharing. Then, a call from my friend Marcus's sister, who worked at Haley's office, pulled the thread taut. Her voice was careful, almost apologetic. "I don't know if I should tell you this, but I saw Haley and Carter hugging in the parking lot after work yesterday. Just a hugging, like lingering, not casual." My chest tightened, but I didn't speak. I processed, stored, and queued for verification. She repeated the details, noting the time, the location, the car they'd used. It wasn't sensationalized. It was raw observational data. When I confronted Haley that evening, she leaned back against the sofa with her usual charm, a half-smile playing at her lips. "People love drama," she said lightly. Her tone suggested it was ridiculous I'd even consider taking this seriously. She knew the script: disbelieve, deflect, diffuse. But I wasn't in the market for performance. I wasn't reading scripts. I was analyzing behavior. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't shout. I let the data do the talking. I stopped asking questions about where she'd been. I stopped chasing excuses. Instead, I started collecting answers. I purchased a small GPS tracker, legal, non-invasive, and placed it in her car, the one registered in my name. I wasn't doing it to punish her. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was seeking truth. Every stop, every detour, every parked hour in places she hadn't mentioned. All of it fed a growing map. I logged addresses, timestamps, durations, repeated visits. Offices, cafes, apartments, gyms. The dots grew in frequency, intensity, and predictability. 2 weeks later, I had a complete visual representation. A sprawling, tangled web of red dots on a map, each one a time-stamped marker of her movements. Patterns emerged immediately. Weekdays followed the office route, with occasional deviations for supposed lunch with colleagues. Weekends told another story entirely. Certain locations repeated, always overlapping with Carter's schedule, always unexplained. A brunch spot near her office, a bookstore across town, a parking garage by the waterfront. Each dot corroborated by the data my tracker had silently logged. The map didn't lie. People do, but data, raw, time-stamped, traceable, never does. I printed the map, red ink bold against pale gray, every point a revelation, every cluster a damning confirmation. I studied it for hours, tracing routes, overlaying timestamps, noting anomalies. There was no room for denial, no place for it meant nothing to hide. Even her carefully curated stories, rehearsed lines, and casual laughter couldn't rewrite this record. The objective truth was laid bare. She had been systematically creating a narrative for the world while hiding a parallel one for herself. It was methodical, deliberate, consistent. Every detour, every rendezvous, every anomaly reinforced the same conclusion. Betrayal wasn't a singular moment in the cafe. It was a pattern, a habit, a series of choices she'd made over weeks, now quantified in a format I could understand and, if necessary, present. The emotional impact was secondary. My clarity came from the numbers, the patterns, the visual map that removed subjectivity from a situation overflowing with it. I didn't confront her with the printout immediately. That would have been impulsive. I waited, timing my next move with the same precision I applied to my analyses at work. Every notification, every text, every hesitation she offered now fed into the next phase of my plan. I archived messages, screenshots, emails, all time-stamped evidence of behavior, contradictions, and obfuscations. The data didn't lie. It never did. And now, I held it in my hands, not as a weapon, but as a lens through which I could finally see the entire narrative, from first cafe confession to repeated deception, in stark, undeniable clarity. That night, as I pinned the map to the corkboard in my home office, I felt an unexpected calm. Every red dot was a decision she had made. Every path traced was a confirmation of her disregard for truth. And I, for the first time since the confession, felt the possibility of control return. Not revenge, not drama, control. The clarity of data over emotion. A strategy forming in the margins of my mind, precise, executable, and mercilessly logical. The map, pinned to the corkboard, told the story in stark red dots. Every detour, every deviation, every late-night drive was now undeniable. Haley had said it was nothing, a moment of weakness. But the data said otherwise. Weekdays were predictable. Office, gym, errands, but weekends told a completely different narrative. Brunch spots across town, bookstores, parking garages, the suburban hotel she swore she had book club at. Trips she claimed were girls' nights. All plotted in glaring red. Patterns emerged, impossible to dismiss. It wasn't conjecture or paranoia. It was documented, time-stamped truth, repeating with terrifying consistency. I called her into the home office, my voice steady, controlled. She followed reluctantly, glancing at the map like it was a crime scene. Her expression was calm at first, a mask she'd worn countless times before, until I started showing her the details. I handed her the first sheet. The GPS logs, route after route, times and addresses clearly marked. "Explain this," I said simply. She laughed nervously, the kind of humor used to dismiss fear, as though I were overreacting. "You're acting like a psycho," she said. Her attempt to control the narrative was immediate, instinctive. Classic Haley. I didn't flinch. I slid the next set of documents across the desk. Security camera stills from the office building and the elevator lobby of Carter's apartment complex. There they were, her and Carter, walking together, casual smiles, arms brushing, completely at ease with each other in a space where she claimed she never lingered. She froze. Her lips parted, a subtle tremor in her jaw, but no words came. She hadn't expected this, couldn't anticipate the level of evidence I had collected. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch, letting the visuals and data speak. My voice, when I finally spoke, was low, deliberate. Pack your things. Not a question. Not an appeal. Command. She stared at me, disbelief flashing across her eyes. You can't just. Yes, I can. I'm asking nicely once. When she refused, the choice became obvious. I moved into the procedural phase. I froze our joint bank account, revoked every card she had access to, changed passwords to every account we had shared, and logged off all devices. Email, streaming, subscriptions. She no longer had access to a single service tied to me. Each action was deliberate, methodical, a cold manifestation of consequences she had earned. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, brief and precise. Full eviction protocol. She refuses to leave. Please proceed. By noon the next day, formal notice had been served. A courier delivered the documents to our shared address. Signed, notarized, and time-stamped. Every step was documented, every action traceable. That evening, the confrontation escalated when her mother, Karen, and sister, Brooke, arrived at the apartment. They were pleading, flustered, panicked. Give her another chance, Karen said, voice breaking. You can't end it like this. 3 years, don't throw it away. Brooke jumped in, echoing the same lines, urgency in her eyes. They were a single unit, rehearsed, trying to influence me emotionally. I asked a single question. Do you know Carter is married? The room fell silent. Karen's eyes widened. Brooke's hand froze in midair. Neither said a word. The silence stretched long enough for their own consciousness to fill it. They left shortly after, wordless, the weight of their complicity pressing in the absence of dialogue. Alone in the apartment, I walked slowly past the corkboard, looking at the red dots, the maps, the photos, each one a testament to decisions made, to deception documented. My chest felt heavy, but my mind was clear. Emotions had been accounted for. Logic had ruled the day. Evidence had triumphed over improvisation. The eviction notice wasn't vindictive, it was inevitable. The patterns she created had left no other option. I sank into the sofa, finally allowing myself to breathe. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the private war that had been waged in a quiet apartment. Every flame, every map, every documented deviation, the orchestration was complete. Haley's betrayal had been meticulous, public and private, but so was my response. The red dots didn't lie, and now I had the clarity to act, unencumbered by performance, unblurred by manipulation. Control was restored. Not reconciliation, not revenge, control. And for the first time since that confession in the cafe, I felt like I owned the narrative. A week passed in precise, measured increments, each day calculated and deliberate. Haley had begun the slow, reluctant process of packing. She tried to maintain her usual theatrics. Tears, pleading, occasional staccato bursts of anger. But the pattern of deceit had already been exposed, mapped, and documented. Every attempt at manipulation faltered against the evidence. The red-dotted GPS maps, the elevator photos, the hotel receipts, the flight logs from supposed girls' nights. Every lie she had relied upon to maintain control had been systematically neutralized. By Thursday evening, she loaded the last of her boxes into her car and drove away, headlights disappearing into the dusky street like a retreating shadow, leaving the apartment, and me in absolute silence. Carter had already transferred to another branch, a move apparently coordinated to minimize scandal at the office. His absence removed the final variable of uncertainty, leaving the trajectory of Haley's story fully contained within the narrative I had created. When she attempted to reclaim her dignity publicly, she miscalculated spectacularly. That Friday morning, a teary TikTok appeared on her account. Haley framed herself as the victim, talking directly to the camera about a toxic ex who tracked her car, and how unfair it was to have her privacy violated. The video lasted less than a minute but was enough to ignite a social wildfire. Within hours, the narrative she had tried to spin unraveled. Comments cascaded down her post like a landslide, many quoting screenshots from the promotion party. Photos of her and Carter hugging, laughing, and in several instances caught mid-kiss. Each comment, each screenshot, each time-stamped image was irrefutable, a direct contradiction to her carefully staged TikTok. Within 6 hours, the post was deleted, her attempt at reclaiming control evaporating in the digital aftermath. For a fleeting moment, I considered scrolling through, seeing the chaos she had triggered online. But I didn't. I had achieved my own resolution. I didn't need to witness her embarrassment to feel vindicated. The engagement ring, once intended to mark the start of a new chapter, remained untouched since the tickets had burned. I retrieved it from its velvet box and made a practical decision. I sold it to a reputable jeweler, receiving a sum sufficient to cover the cost of a weekend trip with my brother, Marcus. Planning, logistics, and timing were executed with the same precision I had applied to every prior step. No impulsive spending, no emotional outbursts, just controlled action. Saturday morning, we boarded a train to New York, a city brimming with anonymous faces and high-rise possibilities. The apartment I had left behind now carried no ghosts, no hidden agendas, no spectral reminders of betrayal. On the rooftop of an old hotel in Soho, overlooking the jagged skyline, the spires of Empire State, the glass towers reflecting the sun's late afternoon glow, I poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Marcus raised his glass. "To closure," he said, his tone light, but I knew he understood the magnitude of what had just concluded. I sipped slowly, letting the amber liquid warm my chest. The city hummed beneath us, indifferent to human drama, indifferent to betrayal, indifferent to petty revenge. I realized then that real revenge wasn't about rage, didn't require humiliation, didn't hinge on punishment. Real revenge was peace, the kind that arrives when you stop renting mental and emotional space to someone who only brought chaos, someone who orchestrated betrayal as if it were a form of art, someone whose every smile had a ledger of deception behind it. Peace was knowing that I had not only survived, but regained control. Apartment, finances, narrative, dignity. The wind tugged gently at my jacket, carrying with it the distant honks, the muffled chatter of pedestrians below, the faint aroma of street food. I let the panorama sink in. No texts, no calls, no manipulations. Nothing left to track, nothing left to prove. I was free. The data had spoken. The evidence had guided me. The consequences had been delivered. Haley had her lesson, and I had mine. Clarity trumps chaos, evidence trumps emotion, and timing. Execution, even in personal matters, matters more than words. I raised my glass again to the horizon, to the skyline, to my own autonomy. To clarity, I murmured, voice barely above the wind. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt it. Unshakable, quiet, exacting satisfaction. The city below went on, indifferent, unaware, and that was perfect. Freedom, after all, was not loud. It was steady, procedural, and irreversible.